In a sexually mature female, a predictable series of changes occurs every month within the ovaries and within the uterus. These processes are referred to separately as the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle, and they are regulated by specific hormones. These processes are linked by a series of cascading events that all place themselves around ovulation. It all begins when the hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH, into the hypophyseal portal system. This hormone travels to the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland and connects with cells that have receptors for GnRH. These are the acidophils of the anterior pituitary gland, and they make the hormones FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, the luteinizing hormone. Like any hormone, these chemical messengers are released into systemic circulation. LH finds its targets in the thecal cells surrounding ovarian follicles, and it prompts them to produce androgens that can then be converted into estrogens by the granulosa cells. FSH finds its target in those granulosa cells, causing them to make more and more estrogen. When ovarian follicles are called primary follicles, they have very little granulosa and they produce very little bit of estrogen. This causes really slow follicle growth at first, and it also causes inhibition of GnRH. As the granulosa cells are slowly added, the level of estrogen slowly rises, and it comes to some tipping point. And at this tipping point, the level of estrogen, it switches. It no longer slows the growth of the follicle, but it switches to accelerating it. The high level of estrogen produced by the added granulosa cells creates a positive feedback mechanism to add more granulosa cells that create more estrogen, causing more granulosa cells. At high levels, estrogen encourages gonadotropin releasing hormone to be released, and at high levels, estrogen encourages the release of FSH and LH as well. It's important to realize that the effects of estrogen on hormones and oocytes is different at high and low levels. It's the opposite, actually. The rising level of estrogen also causes some of the primary oocytes arrested in meiosis 1 to restart meiosis. Estrogen has somatic effects as well. They're important to maintain throughout the female lifetime. Estrogen is like superaldosterone. It causes the reabsorption of a lot of salt and a lot of water, causing the bloating common in the ovarian cycle, pre-ovulation. Estrogen also helps maintain cholesterol. Some women entering menopause have horrible cholesterol issues from the loss of estrogen. Better known are the calcium issues that accompany menopause and the loss of estrogen. Estrogen encourages osteoblasts to be actively removing calcium from blood and storing it in your bone reservoir. With the loss of estrogen, osteoclasts and their bone-eating osteolysis start to outperform the osteoblasts, leading to osteoporosis. Can't you just take more calcium? No. You need to bank that calcium in before you get to menopause. Further complicating the accumulation of calcium, either in or out of menopause, is the need for vitamin D and sunlight. There's no use taking that calcium, and there's no use taking that vitamin D if you're not going to get sunlight. Permissiveness was a topic that we saw back in the endocrine system. At very high levels, the thyroid hormones inserted receptors for epinephrine into cardiac muscle tissue. So the body wasn't creating more epinephrine, but this made the myocardium of the heart more responsive to already circulating epinephrine levels. This permission that the thyroid hormone gave to epinephrine generated high heart rate associated with hyperthyroidism. Estrogen and progesterone do the same thing to each other. Estrogen spends its time pre-ovulation inserting receptors for progesterone into organs. And then progesterone, post-ovulation, spends its time inserting receptors for estrogen into organs. Progesterone is known as the pregnancy hormone, and it dominates the phase that comes after ovulation. The remaining granulosa in the ovary converts to a corpus luteum, which emits progesterone and just a little bit of estrogen. At this point, the entire body is waiting for a zygote to be implanted in the uterus. The corpus luteum is like, well, I sent forth an ovum. Let's just assume it's going to be fertilized and let's nest. The endometrium of the uterus starts to thicken with increased blood delivery from those coiled arteries and with increased mucus from those mucus glands. Lipid metabolism preserves as much as it can instead of spending the calories. Hair is not lost. You have to remember that we are mammals to find us having hair and mammary glands needed both for reproduction. Hair is something that in other mammals can help conserve heat, especially when living exposed to the elements. As progesterone reaches its peak, it starts to thicken the cervical mucus, and this causes a cervical mucus plug through which sperm have trouble swimming. And this prevents a second pregnancy, which could cause competition in the womb. I once read an article, I think it was even in Life magazine. It was about a woman who was a surrogate and was implanted with a zygote from another couple. Successful implantation. And after it was confirmed that she was indeed pregnant with the other couple's fetus, she became pregnant with her own fetus. So a cervical mucus plug should have prevented that from happening. Estrogen-based birth control usually has an increasing dose of estrogen for 3 weeks, just like the follicular phase, and then a week that lets estrogen levels fall. In contrast, the progesterone-only pill delivers a constantly high level of progesterone, just like the corpus luteum does in pregnancy. In that way, the progesterone-only birth control pill simulates pregnancy, tricking the cervix into making a cervical mucus plug, which is maintained by the constantly high level of progesterone. What if you miss a day? The cervical mucus plug, it washes away, and you have to start all over again. This is what led to the creation of IUDs, or intrauterine devices, such as the one pictured here. There are IUDs that deliver constant progesterone right to the uterus instead of delivering it to the body. In the 2010s, these were supplemented with shots of progesterone, such as the Depo shot, which released progesterone into systemic circulation, targeting all of your body tissues, the uterus, as well as other tissues.